can you give a little background? Because I think the background will play into what I want to talk about, or some topics we want to
Sure.
talk about today. So just a quick rundown of how you started, and how you
Hmm.
started is a lot like a lot of the other industry, how they
Yeah.
started. But yeah, how you started, some background, and then yeah, we can get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Originally from Detroit, Michigan. However, I don't sound like that anymore because I've been in the South so long, which is not a bad thing. Um, Redneck Yankee is pretty much my moniker these days. Uh, Graduated from high school in Tennessee, went back up to Detroit, looking for a career. College, was an opportunity there, playing sports, things of that nature. It didn't work out. And so I needed something to do and decided to go into a recruiter's office one day and thought, you know what, the Navy would be a good option because if it doesn't, work out up in Detroit, um, I could always go back and work at TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority. Knew a lot of friends that I had that I graduated with. Their parents worked for TVA. I graduated in a little small town in western middle Tennessee called Erin, 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 Tennessee. It's in Houston County. Um, Great little town, completely different than anything I ever grew up around in Detroit, obviously. But it was next to Cumberland City, which was one of the large fossil fuel power plants for TVA. So a lot of their parents worked for them. So where that kind of led me to was looking up Navy and realizing that there was engineering departments working with boilers, machinery, turbines, pretty much everything that you would find over at the Cumberland City plant for TVA. And I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity. I still had dreams and aspirations of getting the money together to be able to go back to college and play baseball. And as you know, or may know, scholarships for baseball at that time were not very plentiful, nor was I very good. So they weren't giving me a whole lot of money to play baseball, that's for sure. And so that's the idea was, have something to fall back on. And so I went to boot camp up in Great Lakes. Some people call it Great Mistakes, but it was a path the Lord put me on that has got me to where I am today. And so I never regretted it. Went out to the fleet, um, became a machinist mate. Machinist mates, for those that aren't aware, a lot of people hear the word machinist and they think tool and die. This is not that. Machinist mates worked with steam related equipment, turbines, evaporators, steam generators, things of that nature. But on the ship that I was on the USS Coronado. We were actually home based out of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, which everybody be like, that's great. As a student in school for the Navy, I was in the top percentile of the class. So they said, where do you want to go? And it's like, it's the kid that grew up in the cold of Detroit. It's like, shoot, I want to go to Hawaii. So little did I know that you get little bit of island fever when you live in Hawaii for a while. Being on the admiral's ship, we didn't really go out a lot. But anyway, so that kind of led me into the world of steam, and I wish I would have taken a better opportunity during my Navy time. I would tell anybody, and I have told people that, oh, we're going to go into the Navy. And it's like, look, you're going to be a little wide eyed, but take advantage of the opportunities that the military is going to give you and learn all you can. Because I came out of the Navy with this concept that I knew a lot. I actually came out of school with the concept that I knew a lot, upper percentile of the class. And boy, I just walking around and got meritorially advanced, because of my schooling. And I get to the fleet and I knew nothing, Eric. I mean, nothing, you know. And so it was the opportunity to learn. And I would tell anybody that gets into something like that is take those opportunities seriously and don't waste your time. Um, got out, and I know you said to keep this brief, but I tend to talk a little bit too much, so you can cut me off anytime. But I got out and really didn't know what to do. There were some family situations that occurred that did not allow me to go to college. We won't get into that. That's not what this podcast is about. Nor did I have an opportunity to go to TVA. I tried to apply for their apprenticeship program and was told that I was overqualified at 22 years old. Eric, imagine that. Um, we know what that was probably all about. And I told the guy who told me that the only thing I was overqualified for at that point was flipping burgers at McDonald's. So well, I think I told you that one time before. And so it was a rude awakening. I had to find a job. And so I went to work as a welder and tinkered with low pressure boilers at a plant, just trying to wait for the opportunity. And I remember going into, we used to call it the unemployment office. Now I think they call it workplace development or employment securities or something like that now, and looking for an opportunities. And I wish to this day that I could remember the gentleman. I can see him in my face. He's about 6 foot tall, African American, just the nicest guy with a tie and a short sleeve white shirt. And he sat down with me and he said, "Well, let's look at some opportunities here, son." And he starts pulling out all these state jobs, you know. And here I am. I guess I was probably 23 at the time, and I come across this job, two jobs. One as a state boiler operator, and another was a state boiler inspector. I kind of dig that. And so I applied. I went and interviewed, and I was told that I was too young. So apparently, at the time, back in the day, there was a requirement. I don't know if it was written or unwritten that said that you had to be 25 years old to carry a commission. I've never found anything that stipulated that. Maybe it's for somebody listening that's older than me that could come back and say, yeah, that was something back in the day. It said you had to be 25 years old to carry a commission with the National Board. I was too young. Told me that. I said, okay. So still working, still doing. Moved to Nashville. Was working summer. And some guys said, we're going to take the summer and we're going to work an evening job at Robert or Cisco lumping groceries, the food supply company, so that we could have a summer of in the sun and then we'd go to work at night. And all of a sudden I turned 25 and I get a call from the state or a letter from the state. And they said, "Hey, we have a position. We remember you. Are you interested?" And I thought, well, that's kind of neat. And so that started my career as being the youngest boiler inspector uh, ever hired for the state of Tennessee at the time. So worked that role, went to Jackson, Tennessee, and learned along the way and took one of the hardest tests I've ever taken, which was the National Board Commission exam. It was a lot different back then, Eric. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to talk to inspectors about their commission. The older, I'm 57 years old, so those that took it before me and recently after I did would tell you that that test was a little ridiculous. It was all the first day was all mathematical calculations, engineering calculations. You got 5 questions in the morning. You had to write out your answers. Okay. If you didn't show your work, you didn't get credit. And then the afternoon, they gave you 5 more questions. And then the second day was a half a day, and it was 50 essay style questions that you had to write out your answers to. And they would give partial credit and things of that nature. And my main man, Bob Schuler with the National Board, he has since passed. He was called a lot of things in his time, but one thing I'll tell you, he was one of the most code smart people I ever knew. Um, and he would grade those tests, and he gave you no quarter. He would take you down on that. But I can remember Eric giving an answer for a compensation problem that took 5 pieces of paper to answer the problem. So that's kind of what that test was. And again, that was a situation where I was so confident. They called me the golden child, and oh, this guy's so smart. I passed that exam by the skin of my teeth, and that was another eye opening experience. So, what you'll see as I'm going through all this is a lifetime of continual learning, a lifetime of learning from failures, not from successes, but from failures. And so I served as a deputy inspector for about 8 years until my predecessor, Don Tanning, moved on to the National Board, and he became the executive director. And Don had been the chief. We had very similar backgrounds, though he retired from the Navy. I only served 4 years, and but we could relate, and that's kind of the industry had a lot of those people that were ex-military, ex-Navy. Um, they are, I hate to say it, but a lot of them are dying out, and so the industry had to change. How they did the test, and how they broke up the test, and had different licenses that went along or endorsements that went along with it. Whereas it didn't it was like if you were a boiler inspector, you got to do repairs, you got to do in service, you got to do a lot of things. Now it's kind of divvied up. So anyway, back on track. So then I was appointed chief oiler of the state of Tennessee. Served that role for 7 years. Kind of got a little bit, lack of a better term, a little bit tired of politics of state government. It kind of wore on me a lot. 6 of those 7 years, I was the youngest chief inspector in North America. I think I'm the third youngest chief inspector ever to have been a chief inspector in North America. What does that mean? That means I went in with a lot of confidence and some would call it arrogance, and um, needed to learn a lot, and I did. I had some great mentors during that time, some guys that had been in the industry for decades. And so in January 2008, I said, that's enough. Shocked everybody. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that I was leaving. They thought I was going to be, a lot of people would say I was going to be the heir apparent, for the national board. And that just wasn't me. For the longest time, I thought that would be me, the person that would be out front. I realized the Lord gives everybody talents. Um, and my talent was not that diplomat that sat up front. I was the guy in the background that helped that guy succeed. And so now the national board is led by an extremely talented person and a dear friend of mine, Joel Amano. Joel and I, grew up in the national board together. He's just a little bit older than me, even though he looks a whole lot older than me, in case you in case he ever watches this. Um, and he is just, I can't say enough about him. I mean, when you say the Lord puts people in positions, the Lord put the right person in the position to lead the national board into the next few decades. I mean, he is amazing. So I left state government, went to start a company. That was 2008. For those that remember, 2008 was not a good time to start a company. Hung with it for a couple years, and then in October of 2010, I was asked to join Boiler Supply Company. Went to work with Boiler Supply. The idea was to bring all their individual locations together under one uniform process because they had four different sites that operated four different ways. And so that kind of was the task I took on, and I enjoyed that as director of service operations for about 3.5 years until I started Boy Scout Training Group. A lot of people ask, well, where does BTG come from? And it's because I started it under a Boiler Supply Company, which is BOYSCO is kind of an acronym, if you would, for Boiler Supply Company. Um, and so I started BTG, worked from about 2015, and then I started ECS Consulting in 2018, and then acquired all the intellectual property for BTG and continued to run that as its own separate entity. And so now my parent company is ECS Consulting, and then we also have the Boy Scout Training Group. And so I've been doing that ever since. Really enjoy what I do. A lot of people, I know you're the same way, Eric. You really enjoy this industry. You're very dedicated to it. I could, tell by looking at the rig that you built behind you. That was classic. I wish I had the desire or the patience to put something like that together. That's amazing. I'm gonna get you to bring me over one of these days. And so I've been doing that. So on the other side, yeah, I'm been married for nearly 21 years. I have my beautiful wife, Kristen. We moved to Florida because she took on an executive role with Advent Health, and and two children. My oldest is 19. She actually goes to Mississippi State University. She's home for the winter break, holiday break. She's got to go back on Saturday. That breaks her daddy's heart because I'd love for her to be around. And then I have a 17-year-old rascal of a son. He's awesome, but he is a rascal just like I was when I was his age. So he didn't fall far from the tree. And he's a senior in high school, and he's looking at college opportunities and baseball opportunities. And he's now taller than his dad. You remember? I mean, you're a tall guy too, Eric. I'm not short, and he's taller than me now, but I'm still dad. And other than that, I serve on some committees. We talked about this. I used to be on the ASME committees when I was chief inspector. But now that I'm a business owner, any committee I serve on, as you know, I pay for to go to. So I serve on the National Board Inspection Code Committee and have for years, even when I was chief. Currently, I'm on the main committee, which is the overall um, operation committee for the NBIC. I also am vice chair for the repairs and alterations part of the NBIC. Serve on the subgroup of that part. I'm off of that to give some newer people opportunities to serve on the subcommittee so that I can kind of go around to the other parts during that Tuesday. And then the one that's really fun is I serve on the interpretations for repairs and alterations. So anybody that sends in any type of, hey, what does this mean? Type of questions, that committee task for, I guess is what they're called. We get to we get to go over those and answer. And so when you see those interpretations, know that they came through our committee first, and that's about it, buddy. Other than that, I love this industry. As you know, I have a passion for it. One of the advantages that I've had is that I think I put my fingers on every part of this industry, from the manufacturing to repairs to training to inspection. And I learn something new every single day, every day. And that's about it.
That is a great intro. Much greater than I would have done.
Thank you.
Couple questions on that. I so the national board,
Mhm.
uh, when you're talking about commission, what does that mean?
But what the national board does is they do a lot of different things, but on the commission side of, they will issue, lack of a better term, the license to be a boiler inspector. And so the majority of the jurisdictions in the United States and provinces of Canada have some sort of a boiler law. Okay, there are a few still out there that don't, but all of the provinces I know, I've got to go back and look and see if there are any states that are left over. I know some of the last that you know jumped on board were like Alabama, but they've been one for a number of years now. South Carolina, and so what happens is to have to be part of the national board or to have a member. And when I mentioned being the chief, all member jurisdictions have a representative, and that representative is the member of the national board. So during my 7 years as chief, I was the actual member that represented the state of Tennessee during any of the functions and enforcement of the codes. And so the national board, the NBIC, is then adopted by a jurisdiction in whole or in part. And of that, you have commissioned inspectors. So the first tier of being a boiler inspector is to get your in service commission. So that's your inspector that's going to go out, and we used to call it kicking water heaters. It's you can inspect anything from a booster heater in a kitchen to a boiler at a hospital system. And so that's going to be your in-service inspector. And then that commission then allows for you to get other endorsements. Now, when I was an inspector, your commission covered not only your in service, but it also would cover any repair inspections, repair alteration inspections. They changed that up now to where you will get your in service when you take your commission, and then you have to get a repair endorsement, thing, so on and so forth. Um, which I think was not a bad idea because when you gave somebody a commission, that also allowed them to sign off on repair work that's being done. You want to make sure that they have that knowledge base behind them. And back in my day, there were a lot of people that probably shouldn't have signed off, me being one of them early on, until you get more education experience. And so that wasn't a bad thing. Then you can get different types of endorsements, like a shop inspector, which was the main endorsement. I had that. B endorsement was shop inspector supervisor. And when you say shop inspector, what does that mean? Well, that means you're manufacturing equipment to the ASME code, American Society of Mechanical Engineers, boiler and pressure vessel code. So for a power boiler, I know you know this, but maybe your listeners might not. For a power boiler, that would be quote unquote a high pressure boiler, anything greater than 15 psi speed. is going to be built under Section 1 of the ASME code, a Section 4 boiler, like a heating boiler, which could be, we're talking steam, is a steam boiler 15 psi or below, is built under Section 4 of the ASME code. And then unfired pressure vessels would be built. Your standard air storage tank is going to be built under Section 8, Division 1. So that's just kind of an example there. And those inspectors have to be familiar with those codes. They have to go to a school that is going to teach them about those codes. They're going to be given an exam. They have to pass the exam before they get the endorsement. Same thing goes with your shop inspector supervisor. And I also went to nuke school for the end endorsement. And that's for a nuclear power inspector. And so you're talking about Section 3. So that's where that comes from, is the commission. Is if you think about it as being a license for a tradesman to do a specific job, like an electrician, well, think of that same thing for a boiler inspector. And those boiler inspectors can work for a jurisdiction. They can work for an AIA, which is an acronym for Authorized Inspection Agency. Think of your Hartford Steam Boilers, your Travelers, back in the day, Factory Mutuals, things of that. Those were also boiler inspectors, and they would then get an additional state commission to work in, like, the state of Tennessee. And usually what happens is, if you got your national board commission, you would apply to the states. They would look at it and say, oh, you got a national board commission. We'll go ahead and issue you a state license or a state commission. Some jurisdictions would say, that's great, all good, but we want to make sure you understand our rules and regulations. So they'd give them another exam. So that's where that comes from.
Can you quickly explain what the National Board is or does in relation to boilers versus ASME? Because a lot of newer people, and I being one of them, and probably still don't fully understand the role of the National Board and how it comes alongside ASME, but they're two different separate organizations.
They are, and I'm gonna try to follow your lead in there with say quickly. I mean, anybody to tell you that you never get much quick out of me when it comes to. That's why people thought I should have been a politician, I think.
Yeah, I'm just trying to summarize it for the people listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even me, that I've been doing it 10 years, it's still kind of all right, how do these two organizations, they're separate, but they run very parallel.
They absolutely do. And for a lot of years, because when I was with the National Board, as the chief inspector, a member of the National Board, I was also on a member of the board of trustees. So we really, really, and they still do, and that's why Joel is so strong in his roles, because we grew up around this. Is that though they are two different organizations or associations, if you would, they're organizations too, but they're made up. If you're not on staff, you're a volunteer. So all the codes and standards, they are not government agencies. A lot of people may think that the National Board is a government agency or the ASME is government. It's not. Just like NFPA is not.
I believe both are technically are both nonprofit organizations.
Not for profit,
yeah.
Probably is a better term. But again, I'm not a tax attorney, so I'm not going to argue.
Yeah, legal wise, but
yeah, legal wise,
not they're corporate entities, not government entities, but they're not for profit organizations. As far as, and that
absolutely
is a wide variation of organizations, but essentially they exist. The technical definition of it, they exist to not make a profit.
That's right. We that's why the difference was for the National Board was to say the term not for profit versus nonprofit. is that, and with the board of trustees, we would have to look at this, is that you're allowed to keep so much funds. Anyway, let's not get off on that. But yeah, absolutely. And so one of the big things that, Joel has always been a strong supporter of is the parallel um, duties or tasks that run side by side with the ASME and the NBIC. And so to kind of answer that question, what's the difference between them? Um, is when you look at it, you think ASME, and again, I will have people argue this with post construction um, allowances within the ASME. Um, ASME is construction, NBIC is post construction. Okay, and so when you build a vessel, you build a boiler, you build a pressure vessel, you build whatever. Once that vessel is in essence stamped, and I mean, I can go into greater detail what that means to be stamped. Once it is stamped as completed, then the ASME is gone. The only time the ASME is going to come back into it is when we get over into the MBIC and we start to do repairs. We start to do installations, we do inspections, and then the MBIC then references back to the original code of construction. The difference is a lot of people think that for you to use the MBIC, you've got to build to the ASME code, and that's not true. You can build to other codes, the CE certificate or EU certifications for vessels being constructed. Getting approval on a vessel that was built to the German code. Okay, well, built to the German code, something happens to it, it needs to have code repairs done. Those code repairs can be done to the MBIC, okay, but they are going to be repaired to the original code of construction, going to be tested to the original code of construction. So that's where you're really, in a simplified way of saying it, is that's where you're going to see the difference. Is ASME is going to be construction, NBIC is going to be post construction. And the NBIC does, or the National Board does more than just commission and the keeper of the NBIC. They do valves, they do training. When I say valve, safety valve certification, they have a wonderful valve lab that safety valve manufacturers have to actually send their valves up to verify their capacities, and they get their certifications for those valves. So they do a lot more than just commission inspectors and write code. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, that's enough for podcast without getting the whole, full 2 hours on the national board. But if you're a boiler person, you go out and you look at it like a safety valve and you see NB with a little fancy square around it, that's national board.
That's right. You see it with the low clover leaf. It's called the clover leaf. That's where I think a lot of confusion does come up sometimes, is because though they are not exactly alike, they both the ASME and the National Board use a stamp that has a symbol of a kind of a clover leaf, a 4-leaf clover around it. And so they look kind of similar, and a lot of people thought they were the same thing.
Yeah, ASME uses, now it's updated, but they use a clover leaf with ASME diagonal
That's right.
across it, and then in addition they'll add a letter, and that letter goes to the section of the boiler and pressure vessel code. So if it was a section 1 boiler, it would be for like a high pressure boiler that's like normal. I don't know how to define normal, but it would be an S. Or if it's an electric boiler, it's an E. And that's,
or an M. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could be
miniature
either.
boiler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
that's very good, and that's something that we laughed, for years. We laughed at sitting on the ASME codes. We're like, "Oh my gosh," you got these manufacturers that are assigned these metal stamps, and that's what they are, a metal stamp, and if they build, section 1, section 4, section 8 div 1, power piping, yada they have all these different stamps, and it finally came to a point where they started listening, and I had since been gone by then. They started listening. He said instead of having all these individual metal stamps with the S inside the clover leaf or the H inside or the HLW, they did exactly what you said. Is that it's you're going to get a master stamp, ASME, and you can apply whatever sub indicator that you're authorized to, that you carry a certificate of authorization to apply. And it just makes it so much more efficient. And, people are losing stamps that they don't use for a long time. And maybe they haven't made a miniature or they haven't done anything power piping. And then somebody says, oh, well, we're going to build this full piece. And they go out and say, anybody seen the PP stamp? And it's like, oh, yeah. So that's pretty smart of them.
and by stamp we mean a piece of metal tooling that has a upside down letter or symbol on it, and when
Hmm.
you strike it with a hammer against a piece of metal, it indents it, and now you are permanently indenting the metal and showing. And that's what he meant by when he was talking about getting an ASME stamp. If we look at a boiler, like a fire tube boiler, ASME states where it needs to be, but and the information. But if you look at it'll be permanently attached to a pressure vessel on a plate, or it'll be actually stamped into the pressure vessel,
Hmm.
but it'll be information. And that's essentially like kind of like your VIN number of your car. And that VIN is going to be stamped on your frame, stamped on your engine, stamped and under your windshield. That VIN number of the boiler, that's what um when somebody looks at a boiler and wants to know where it came from and all this other stuff. It's been painted 100 times and the manufacturer's stickers are all off of it. That stamp is like, hey, this is what this pressure vessel actually is.
That's a good point. And if I could add to that, that's where you will see a couple different things. You will see, number one, the actual um, code stamp, as we're discussing. But then you'll also see the National Board registration stamp. Okay. If it's not stamped National Board registration, they actually can use National Board, they can use abbreviation of it. But what they're going to do is they issue it a number, they being the manufacturer. And some of the things that can be confusing because you can say, oh, well, that's the social security number of that boiler. Well, it is and it isn't. It's not just the number, it's the manufacturer and it's the year. Mostly it's the manufacturer. So what you would do is if I needed to find out some information about that particular boiler, let's say I need to get the manufacturer's data report. And who's going to have that information? Well, it's going to be in the National Board. That's where the National Board registration comes from. Is that the boiler manufacturer in the United States, I want to say Canada sometimes matters where the boiler is going to be, is going to be required to register their boiler with the National Board. Because let's take the state of Tennessee for instance. State of Tennessee is going to tell you that that boiler has to be built to the ASME code and it has to be registered with the National Board. If not, you got to go through a whole big process of getting authorization as a Tennessee special with the state of Tennessee. I mentioned that earlier with one of the clients I'm working with. So those go hand in hand. Now, let's say something happens. Well, something happens to it. and you get a repair company to come do a code repair on it. That repair company is going to have to get a copy of the manufacturer's data report. If the user doesn't have it on hand, or the jurisdiction doesn't have it, most of them don't get. You got to call up to the national board. Well, if you just call up to the national board and say, "Hey, I've got national board number 12345. Can I get a data report?" They're going to say, "Well, I need more information than that." And that more information is, I need to know who the manufacturer is, because manufacturer A could put national board number 12345, but so can manufacturer B. Okay. Because the national board registration has everything to do with that particular manufacturer. Okay. So that plays a part in it. And so you have to kind of line that all up. So if any of your listeners ever run across that situation, don't just find the national board number, find out the manufacturer's name as well. And there are some manufacturers that have different shops, that have different stamps. Okay, they have their own stamp. So their name may be very similar, but they may have a hyphenated something in their name that differentiates them from their sister company. And so you got to have all that information handy before you can call up to the national board and ask them. Because if not, they're going to have to go through a big long search, and they may or may not be willing to do that.
And that manufacturer's name is also stamped in
Hmm.
that by the information. And that, especially in this global economy, the manufacturer's name of the pressure vessel does not mean the manufacturer's name on the
That's right.
side of the boiler. And I know I think it's French AIC maybe, or maybe that are South Korean. I forget. But AIC builds pressure vessels. It's a foreign company for, I don't know, like Lochinvar or Patterson Kelly, multiple, and this is all on the condensing boiler market, but multiple manufacturers will buy those pressure vessels and then stick it in their boiler and design their boiler around it. So
Hmm.
if you say, "Hey, I have a Patterson Kelly boiler," but if you actually look at the actual stamping of the pressure vessel, which is going to be the metal of the boiler, it's going to say something different, like AIC or something. That's going to be the company that actually built it and actually applied all the markings, which
Hmm.
don't get confused because they're different.
It's very similar, Eric. When you talk about that, you say that you have somebody that you look on the box, and the box has one name, but the person that actually or the company that actually manufactured it for the name on the box. They sent it to them. Well, let's say they'll do the same thing for boilers. I had a situation when I was chief inspector. The national board called me, and ASME had got wind of it. And what happened was, you had a company, and they'll remain unnamed. You had a company that was marketing, selling, and decaling their outside skin of the heating boilers with all of their information. So it looked like this company actually built these vessels, right? And then when you looked on the little foil seal, because as you mentioned, the boilers have to be stamped to the shell as long as the shell is of a specific thickness. Okay. Anything below that, you can attach a plate, but anything above that, you have to you stamp it to the actual shell. And so all that information was underneath all the insulation that wrapped around the unit. You had mentioned like fire tube boilers, like a Scotch Marine fire tube boiler. The code's going to tell you where that stamp needs to be located. That stamp's going to be located on the right side of the boiler at approximately 2 o'clock, right? Well, and then when you go to look, you look up there, you'll see a little sheet metal plate on the side that's got some sheet metal screws, and you take that out, flip that up, and you pull the insulation out, and you'll see all the stamping that you mentioned. Okay. Well, these particular units were more of a coil fin type of unit. And so what they would do is the actual manufacturer would manufacture and then put a bracket that then contained the data plate all under the insulation. Well, what this supplier was doing, I do supplier, was they would then duplicate that plate that's under there with a foil plate that embossed the ASME symbol for HLW. Okay. Remember, we talked about that where it used to be the metal stamp had HLW in it, not ASME like it does now. And so they embossed that on that foil. And then they also put in National Board, abbreviated, and then duplicated the National Board number. Well, both the National Board and the ASME were up in arms about that because you're not allowed to do that. And so it was funny as a chief inspector because you would look at all these inspections reports that would come in from the inspectors, both insurance and state, and they would have the distributor's name as the manufacturer of the boiler. And I would laugh because I was like, yeah, that's what's on the outside. That's what's on that foil sticker, but they never actually inspected the data plate inside, underneath all the insulation that actually gave the manufacturer's name. So you got to be really careful with that.
That's why you should always check for yourself and
That's right.
never look at a piece of paper. I've also, it shouldn't happen, but you also have to remember that everything is done by humans. You get a piece of paper and they say, hey, this is the boiler. And then you take off the cover and you have a different National Board. The model number's different. And
that's right.
You're like, hey, I have the wrong piece of paper for this boiler. And this is actually not, these two do not go together.
Do you got time for a really quick story on that?
We have all the time.
So, back when I was a deputy inspector working out of Jackson, what happened was, Shelby County used to have their own code enforcement that covered the entire county. Okay. And they had a chief inspector. His name was Max Lovelady. Now, we got to remember, this is when I was a young pup. I was still in my 20s. Okay. And so I was raring and ready to go. And, I was working that area. I had a bunch of counties over there. And I go down into Shelby County one time and I go to Cordova. And Cordova was actually outside of the city limits of Memphis. It was still in Memphis, Shelby County, which was its own governmental entity. But the charter for through the National Board was just the city of Memphis, not Shelby County. And so I go into Cordova and I'm seeing all these registrations for, water heaters and things like this. And they reach out to Don Tanner and I'm just like, I'm down here in Shelby County. I'm not even in Memphis and I'm seeing them register. And Shelby County, it was bad because Eric, what they would do is it's kind of like getting your plumbing inspection. You put a water heater in and you get an inspector come out and he inspects it and you're good to go until later on that water heater goes out and now you've been living in the house for a while and you get, John Smith, plumber to come in and puts a new water heater in, right? Done pulling permits. Anyway, so I started, noticing that what Shelby County would do is a building location would open up and they would put in an industrial water or a boiler, okay, commercial water heater, boiler, whatever. And they would do it that one time. And then every year they would just send them an invoice. Pay this invoice for your certificate. And every year they would send it. And I can remember when Max Lovelady retired, they didn't hire anybody. They didn't have a commissioned inspector. So when they did not have any commissioned inspectors, the national board pulled their charter. So they were no longer part of a national board. State of Tennessee and most jurisdictions, state jurisdictions, are going to do this, like an air permit. Air permit in Tennessee, if you live in Nashville or Chattanooga or Knoxville or Memphis, you have to follow that county's air permit requirements. If you don't, you got to follow the state's air permit requirements because the state allows for the individual cities, city counties to regulate their own. And as long as they do, we're good. Well, that's what it was with Memphis. And so once Memphis was not complying with state law, we took it over. And they were not very helpful with us because all it was a money thing. Again, they would just send out renewals. So I can remember we teamed up and all the inspectors went down and we started going through all these boilers that were in service, finding so many that weren't there anymore, but we're still getting a certificate. But there was one situation that was so funny is that we walked in and my partner that was with me, um, Bob Harrison, he and I are still good buddies and we're 30 years apart in age and we're still great buddies. And Bob's over here reading off what the numbers that the city of Memphis gave us for serials and models and all this. And I was like, okay, this one is not matching what you got. And the old guy, the maintenance guy, starts laughing. And Bob and I turn around and look at him. And he goes, son, let me tell you, he goes, that certificate doesn't match the one that boiler's replaced. So they had replaced 3 times or 2 times, and they still had the same certificate on the wall from the original one, and it had been replaced twice before or twice after. And I just laughed. And so what you said is right on. Don't just assume anything. Don't assume that the safety valves on top of your boiler are the proper safety valves. Okay, because the person that replaced them before may have replaced them with ones that aren't suitable for that boiler. So don't just look up there and replace like for like, assuming that it's fine when it may not be. So I like that. That's great advice.
Also, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've found that a lot of people believe that because a boiler is new, it is correct. And when a boiler is new, a new installation and everything, it has the probability of being the most incorrect because it is untested and multiple people have not put their eyes on it. So it can leave, and manufacturers have processes, but it can leave the manufacturing a place, and they may have tested the boiler to a certain degree, or they may not have, but I have seen wrong safety valves ship with boilers. I have seen wrong data tags that are stickers applied to boilers that don't match the actual stamp that is inside the boiler. And I've seen boiler inspectors come and be like, hey, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, all on a new installation. And a lot of inexperienced people have this belief that, oh, new is good. And also boiler owners as well believe that, hey, new is good, and we have a couple years till this boiler starts needing service. And it's no, it is a boiler, and it starts day one that it needs water treatment, it needs inspection, and there's no like, oh, it's new, we don't need to worry about it till 5 years down the line. There's all these install processes and install permits and inspections, and outside of just the boiler inspection, the electrical combustion, all this stuff that needs to happen. And that is when the boiler could be the most wrong, because you're relying on the manufacturer to wire a boiler correctly, and hopefully they do, but I've done plenty of boiler startups where it's not wired correctly. I've never had anything catastrophic, but it's like, oh, this is supposed to happen and it doesn't. Oh, well, this relay's wrong or this wire's loose. And so on new installations is when you really want to, you should always do it, but on new installations, you really want to hammer home and, hey, is this report that I have in my hand the same as the actual numbers that are on the actual pressure vessel? And then does that match the equipment data tag? A lot of
Mhm.
manufacturers will put like their own printed data tag,
Mhm.
and making sure everything matches up before you get 5 years down the line. You're like, oh, wait, these don't match. And now you're going back to the manufacturer and everybody looks dumb and it becomes a messy situation.
Yeah, you only have one time to get out to a good start. You really do, and I couldn't say it better, Eric. It's verifying, and you get caught up with that. I always tried to train. I trained inspectors for years. I really push that. It's you got a job to do. Do the job. Don't assume. I've seen boilers that were lit off where supports were put inside the boiler that that were not taken out of the boiler before it's fired up. With supports, and it's like, come on, guys. Oh, well, it just burned up. It's like, no, no, no. That's you got to take that stuff out. Looking at doing the startup because you've done a lot of startups, so it's a good startup, a good combustion setting, starting from the getting insulation on the unit. You've already spent in the case of a lot of the boilers that I'm going to go into and consult on. You spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on new equipment, but you decide that, yeah, I don't want to spend 12 grand on insulation. What? Yeah, I don't. It's a brand new boiler. I don't need to put water treatment in. I don't need to do water treatment. Our water here is fine. I don't need a softener. Yeah, it's you've seen it. I've seen it. Anybody that's been around this industry's seen it. And during the training session, there's a lead into one of our standard modules that we do for trainings for controls and safety devices. And I pull a couple paragraphs of the foreword for CSD1. And I know you've got a copy and you go out there and look at it. And pretty much what it nails down that when I created BTG and started writing training modules, um, I read through that book, I would say from front to back, but it wasn't from front to back. It was the body. I read the body of CSD1. I never read the, forward or the preamble or whatever because that's just more reading, right? And so when I actually saw that, you know, as I was writing that module, my eyes opened up because it said, paraphrasing here, said the major causes of accidents are automatically fired boilers, and it goes down this laundry list. And then it goes on to say that, lack of testing, lack of this, lack of that, lack of trained operators. And then the very last one hits truest: complacency. Complacency on the part of the operator due to long periods of trouble free operation. And complacency kills. It does. And I teach that. I stress that. It doesn't matter if I'm speaking to the state of Alabama at their annual conference. I will put pictures of Star Elementary up on the screen and show photos of dead babies. When I say babies, I mean elementary school kids, and a dead teacher laying next to the dead babies because I want them to see it. I want them to see the complacency that occurred by maintenance personnel who thought they were doing the right thing, thought they were being the hero. And that's one thing that I would preach, and I would love for you to preach to technicians when you talk to them, because I do. It's being the hero is not the person that got the boiler back working. Okay. Being the hero is a person that got the boiler back working safely. Okay. Because we can bypass a lot of controls and safety devices and get something to work, can't we? Absolutely can. And then you end up having uh, boiler relocation. And I'm not talking about on the back of a flatbed from one location to another. I'm talking about one that's ripping through cinder block walls like that happened at Dana Plumley back in 2007. And I said to you, you remember? It's like you knew about that report, but you didn't know when we first met. You didn't know that I wrote that report.
I have the report on my screen. It is the next topic. So
Well, that's funny. So a little segue there, but yeah, and so all that, both of those scenarios, I talk very in depth about the power plant up in Massachusetts when Mark Mooney, one of my and Joel's dearest friends, was chief up there. That blew up and killed 3 people. Had a ruptured tube, killed 3 people. One of them was on the job for 2 days. 21 years old, was an apprentice. Why? Complacency. Okay, so complacency kills.
there's some safety statistic out there. I think, and I don't know where it is, but uh, I think it's around year 12 on the job is when statistically most people get hurt, is
Gotcha.
because they lose their calibration of safety, and by calibration of like what zero is. So to all the listeners, if you put your hand next to a chop saw and safety says, hey, you can only put it 1 foot away, and over 12 years, you find that, oh, I just need to chop a small piece. I'm going to put my hand closer, 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 closer. And you still have your fingers after 12 years, and you're like, that 1 foot rule, whatever, that doesn't apply. And then at year 12, you're like, I've chopped 1,000 pieces of metal. I'm just going to hold it right here next to the saw blade. The saw blade will always be there. And then all of a sudden, metal moves, the saw blade kicks, and it cuts your hand, cuts your finger. And you're like, wait, what happened? I've done this 1,000 times
Hmm.
safely. And that is the same thing with boilers and complacency. Oh, well, we have a plant that has 15 years. It's been running trouble free.
Hmm. Yep.
We're good. We just sit here and, this can be on the boiler operators. Oh, boiler operators, we just sit here. We just pencil whip all these reports that they want.
Hmm.
Nobody looks at the data. And then all of a sudden something happens, and then somebody goes back and they're like, well, either the data doesn't make sense, or some third shift operator was writing down, hey, we have hard water. Hey, we have hard water. Hey, we have hard water. Hey, when I blow down the boiler, I'm not getting anything to come out. Hey,
Hmm.
and all this stuff. And then everybody goes, oh, how'd this happen? Well, there were signs, but nobody pays attention. And especially
Right.
with, it happens with new boilers, as we were talking about, because boiler operation starts day one, and I've seen it. You get a new boiler, and a year later, it's full of scale, and the
Hmm.
boiler owner is like, "What happened? I thought we just like everything's brand new. Why is
Brand
it?"
new.
And it's like, well, see our water softener over here? It's brand new, but it doesn't work without salt in the brine tank.
Amen, brother. I've seen that so many times. That's so funny.
You can say, "Hey, we trained on this and all this stuff," and
That's right.
do all, but if you don't put salt in the brine tank, then that zeolite water softener doesn't work. It doesn't remove the hard water, and
Hmm.
the hard water doesn't care that the boiler's a year old, and now you just filled it full of scale, and
They
now
don't.
you got to retube it. And but the boiler is never going to be the same from there on. Like, you can clean it, do all this stuff, but it's like buying a brand new car and then driving it 20,000 miles without an oil change. Will it make it?
Right.
Probably, but you're going to start wearing the pistons and everything, and the engine will never be the same after that, even if you do change the oil.
And
So,
Eric, something too is that you said about, somebody being on the job for 12 years is around the time when they get injured. The problem that we have is that 2 out of the 3, and even maybe the third one that we're going to talk more about, the Dana Plumley, But the Star Elementary example I gave and the Massachusetts power plant example I made, the complacency, the people that were being complacent weren't the people that died. Okay. It was somebody else's action that caused the death or injury of someone. And, I often say, yeah, Star Elementary happened back in 1981. That maintenance person obviously probably is not working now. He may not even be alive anymore. But I can promise you this, if he is gone, the rest of his life, he had to realize that utilizing a defective uh, thermostatic gas valve that he found on a shelf, okay, to replace on that water heater is what killed those kids, is what killed that teacher, is what sent, you know, more than 30 others to the hospital. And do you really want to be that person? That's what I tell them. And the eyes of people I speak to, either it's in a class or it's in a lecture hall or wherever it's at, they see that I'm serious. They see I'm not just showing a slide. They see the expression of somebody that has seen the results of this, seen the results of complacency. And I tell them, I said, if you can't do it, find something else to do. Find another job if you're not going to take it serious. And by all means, owners, management, don't put these people in a position of responsibility without authority and education. And that's what I preach. Yeah, I may own a boiler training company or a water treatment company, or, we do a lot of training on a lot of things, but I'm not here to try to market more work. Okay. That's not it. It's me trying to tell you I'm tired of seeing people get injured and hearing the stories over nearly 40 years of being in this industry. I've seen people get hurt from complacency and putting production over safety. That's the big one. It's all product. You're going to talk about Dana Plumley. That's a great example of production over safety. Absolutely great example.
Yeah, a couple thoughts before we talk about that. I have on my LinkedIn my banner. It's a scrolling banner, but one of them, it says the best time to investigate a boiler accident is before it happens. And I would love to say I
Yeah.
came up with that, but that is from a boiler insurance ad from like 1950 that they
Wow,
had,
that's
that
good
I
stuff.
had on, that I obtained. But it's
We need
essentially
to put
like,
that on a T-shirt. You think we won't get any copyright infringement there, do you?
oh,
We put that on a T-shirt.
the company has long since probably been bought 40 times and no longer exists. But it's not, I think probably the only company is probably Hartford
Hartford.
Insurance that hasn't been bought 40 times and has existed since the 1800s.
That's right. 1887, I
Yeah.
believe.
And they still got the steam engine or
I
whatever,
love
the
it,
logo.
man. That's
Yeah.
that's historic, man. You take that away, that's like changing the logo of
Ford.
Cracker Barrel.
Yeah. That's
Don't
like,
change the logo. Yeah, absolutely.
but it's essentially like, as a service technician, as a boiler inspector, somebody walking into a boiler room with knowledge, you walk in and say, all right, I need to make sure everything is correct to the best of my knowledge before I say everything's correct. And that's why, I have a CSC1 class and I preach this a lot. A lot of people assume the boiler safeties work. It's just a low gas pressure switch. It's just a high gas pressure switch. I've tested these 100 times before in other places and they always work. Well, you have to have the discipline to say, hey, until I prove to myself that this switch works and operates correctly as intended, it doesn't work. The switch does not exist. That safety does not exist. And you would be surprised when you set that standard on yourself as to what you can find and come up with. And, I, even from being a service technician or even walking into boiler rooms now, I'll like point out stuff and they're like, oh, like it's been like that for 10 years. Nobody has said anything. And I think my number one, if you ever want to blow up on LinkedIn, I think my number one post are posting safety valves with reduced outlets. And you're like, hey, like, this is not right. And then they say, oh, well, that's been like that since it's been installed and it's been inspected. And it's like, okay, but it's not right. And, it,
Okay, so here it is, Eric. Here's a great one. Again, Massachusetts power plant. What caused it? What caused it was excessive fly ash built up in the vestibule that is a dead airspace. It corroded the outside of these tubes that were at 1900 psi, and then caused a pinhole leak that then steam cut into another one, steam cut into another one. Next thing you know, it failed. Well, what did they find during the investigation? But that dead airspace had not been inspected in 10 years. 10 years. And you sit there and say, well, it's ran like that. It ran like that for 9 years. Why should I go in there? And then in year 10, blows up and kills 3 people. One of them 21 years old, 2 days on the job. 2 of them one leaving teenage girls behind, another one leaving grandbabies behind. Like, shut up with that. Don't tell me that. I don't want to hear it. I'm gonna fight you on that every chance I get. It's all about complacency, my man. It really, really is.
yeah, there was one I was reading about in near us, in Apollo Beach, right on the east side of Tampa Bay, the Big Bend Power Station,
And
TECO, and it was like, it's recent, 2018, I believe, 2019. I know nothing about coal boilers. If you're listening to this and in a coal plant or a power plant, invite me out. I want a tour. But
wear some clothes you don't mind, discarding.
yeah, I mean, but
Yeah.
I can't get anybody to give me a tour. Everything's secret. I also don't have
Well,
the right
let me see what I can do
I
for you.
don't have the
We'll
right
see.
contacts either, but I think it was 4 people, but something about like one of the boilers developed a plug in the bottom of like the coal
Hmm.
ash or something, and from TECO history or something, the boiler had never been, in order the proper procedure to clean this out, the boiler had to be shut down. Well, it was during, I don't know, during the summer, something electric load high, and management or somebody determined that we can't shut the boiler down because
Production over safety.
that's going to cost a day of outage, these giant coal boilers, day plus outage or something, and they can't risk it. So they told them to clear the plug live. And once again, I have no idea basically how a coal boiler operates or how this works specifically, but they're in the bottom of the boiler or
Hmm.
something. They open up a door and they're pushing or ramming against something, and all of a sudden the plug came undone, but it came undone like all at one time, and it burned. I believe it was 4 people, and I think all of them died. And basically they were like, this should have never happened when the boiler was online, but it was like an outside contractor or somebody, and they were just
Hmm.
like, hey, get it done. And these guys, a lot of times people will be like, oh, well, just say no. But if you're like, hey, I have a family at home, I have all this, and I'm trying to live paycheck to paycheck, and your boss says, oh, I'll get it done or you're fired. A lot of times, well, one, people don't know any better that it is wrong, but 2,
Hmm.
they're like, I'm just doing what I'm told and doing all this
Yeah,
stuff. And if they say no, like, oh, I can't. So it puts people in a very difficult situation if you
it
have
does.
management or people that make decisions that are not properly informed and make decisions that are not safe, and then people end up dying.
Well, I mean, the going back to Star Elementary, when you look at the course of events, It was early morning when the cafeteria workers saw excessively hot water and steam vapor or water vapor coming out of the nozzle. They call the custodian. Custodian comes in 7:30 ish, turns off the water heater and calls in maintenance. Maintenance comes out. They see that there's an issue, goes back to the shop, grabs the used used thermostatic gas valve that was sitting on the shelf that was salvaged from somewhere else. Don't know, if it works or not, and puts it on there. And around 11 o'clock. So, what do you think they're doing around 11 o'clock at a cafeteria for elementary school? And so then what comes of it is it was fine and good for the custodian to turn the water heater off at 7:30, but it was not okay for them to turn it off at 11:30 after the maintenance guy left. Didn't stick around to make sure everything's going to continue to work fine. Put it on. Why? It's 11 o'clock. Probably time for him to go to lunch. Okay. And so then what happens is 11:30, it's back hot again. Same issues happening. There's no relief valve lifting. I'm going to tell you that here in a second why. No relief valve lifting. Custodian doesn't turn it off second time because they need hot water because it's lunchtime. And just after 12, it blows up and kills those babies. Kills that teacher. Reason why the valve didn't lift was because, as you've probably seen, real estate's very expensive. And so what are they going to do? They're going to have a manufacturer of water heaters say, hey, this is zero clearance. You don't need any clearance on the back side because there's nothing back there to see. There's no maintenance access, no nothing. But what is on the side? What is on the side is your T&P valve. For those that don't know, that's your temperature and pressure relief valve. T&P valve has a sensing probe that is going to sense the temperature. The temperature reaches the set point on these, and it matters what size, but usually it's going to go 210 degrees Fahrenheit because that's required under Section 4 of the ASME code under Part HLW that says those water heaters cannot operate above 210 degrees Fahrenheit for obvious reasons. If you're listening to this, you know that water at atmospheric pressure is going to start to boil at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius. And so what happened is when they had to change out said relief valve, they took the one off, but obviously couldn't pull it off because it was hitting against the wall. So what did they do? They probably took a pair of wire cutters or something like that and bolt cutters, and they probably cut off the probe or unscrewed it or did something, right? It probably fell into the bottom of the tank, and when they went to put the replacement in there, they couldn't get it in there because there wasn't enough room. They were not about to disconnect the water heater, and so what did they do? They took off the temp probe. They took off the temp probe and screwed it in, so pretty much made it inoperative for over temperature protection, right? Doing it the wrong way, getting it to work, being the hero. I'm the hero. Those guys, somebody wanted to be the hero at that power plant, and they wanted to unclog the hopper at the bottom for the fly ash. It's probably what they were doing. Because in most, and I don't want to speak like I know that particular incident because I don't, but I could speculate that that's what they were doing. If they were below the boilers, they were probably unclogging the fly ash hopper and doing it the wrong way.
Yeah. Last, before we get too far off the national board, I probably the only person, but just for pure love of the game, I was looking at if I could just take the classes or whatever for the inspector commission or whatever.
Do it. Do it.
But
It'd be great
it says you have to be a member of a state government organization or
to work.
insurance.
Yeah. Yeah. To work for one, not to take the commission. You can take the commission exam. Um, you can take the commission exam anytime you want. You just cannot receive a commission unless you work for an authorized inspection agency.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm going to look more into that because
Man, take that bad boy. It's somebody of your knowledge and experience. I think that for the in-service side of it, I think for all of it, just because is that the taking that would be no problem for you. And then anything I can do to help you kind of get ready for that, I'd be more than happy to.
yeah, I just looked into it and it said, oh,
Yeah,
these
it's
are the
awesome.
requirements. And I have no,
That's great. Yeah.
I'm a licensed boiler operator in a state and I have no,
In
I,
Florida? In Florida or in
in
Ohio?
Florida doesn't have any,
Boo,
boiler
shoot,
operation
Michigan. Boo.
requirements. And, I didn't want to be a boiler operator. I just did it for the love of the game. And, same
Yeah,
thing with, I don't want to be a inspector or something, but just for love of the game and learning more about the industry, I was like, hey, I want to, learn about the national board and do this and kind of see
do it.
what inspectors are going through and all that stuff. So I'll look back into that now that I know I can at least take
Yeah,
the exam.
absolutely. Absolutely. You just can't get the commission unless you work for an instructor. I mean, things have changed a lot. It used to be AIs were only insurance providers. Now you have inspection companies that don't actually write insurance because they started finding that the services they weren't really underwriting the insurance, somebody else was, and so they're providing the services. And so you have a few companies out there. If I wanted to still be in there, if I had the energy to add another um, flag in the hat or whatever you call it, I would have probably started an inspection agency. But at this juncture, I have no desire to do that.
And
But yeah, you
maybe
could.
in another life, but you can't.
Yeah.
That's one of the hardest things when you're young. You can do anything you want, but then you
Mm.
start getting older and you
Hey, what do you
realize,
say? You're saying if you're young, you can do whatever you want, but when you get
oh,
old, I
I'm
hear you.
thinking young
Okay,
as in like 10, 15.
that's right.
But when you're older, I'm 32, and if you really want to be good at something, you can only do a couple things, and a lot of people
Mm. Yeah,
overextend themselves. I'm going to be in
sure.
this hobby. I'm going to do this for work, this. And the boiler field is ever expanding. There's always new information, but it's by the time you would work as an inspector and a welder and a service technician and a boiler operator and did all this stuff, you would be
That's
60
right. That's
and
right.
there's you can't cover it all and
Hmm.
you only have so many years and you got to choose what is important to you, even though like I would love to sit in a bulldozer for a year. Like heavy equipment is cool and that stuff, or even work on a ship and do stuff like that. But it's like, you can't just be in all these random jobs and do what you cool, or even a crane operator. I think, I love, heights are super cool in the, Florida has a ton of them, but the tower cranes, the
You want to
tower
get it.
crane.
You want to get up there, and everybody looks like little ants walking around.
Yeah, it would be so cool. I love cranes and seeing like, especially with boilers and seeing giant picks. And then if you want to see real life magicians, watch riggers put a boiler into a building, and you'll say, "Oh, you have a half inch of clearance," and they're like, "Ah, might as well be a foot because a
That's
half inch
yes,
is still going to
yes.
get in
Shoot.
there."
John Largent is a good friend of mine with Boiler Supply Company. Well, I say that. Uh, I used to drive him crazy when I was chief inspector. It took a lot of years for him to kind of get that out of his head that I was no longer chief. But he is when I say this that he is probably the most intelligent boiler person I know. And when there is, and I've got a few others. I know, they watch this. I don't want them to get offended, but John is, what makes him so good though too is if he doesn't know the answer, he'll tell you, I don't know. And that's how I am. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know, but I'll do my best to find out the answer, and then guess what? We'll both know the answer. But to listen to him, how many boilers his crews have put into spaces that you just cannot even fathom how they got it in there. And he passes down that knowledge, to his people, and he's been doing it forever. He's actually VP of Boiler Supply Company, and to see some of the way those guys put stuff in, it's very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. That's uh yeah, when you have an industry that basically started America, especially
Right.
in like Chicago and New York,
Hmm.
and then you build an entire city around it, and then they go, "Hey, we have this boiler. We don't know anything about it. It's in the
Yeah.
basement of this building.
Good luck.
It's from 1910 and we need to replace it. How do we do that?" And you got to be creative, and yeah, but let's talk about probably the most famous American boiler accident.
Mm, most
Only,
famous.
I think, famous only because of the report that you
Wow.
made.
Well, I thought we were
Because
going to talk about the Sultana here for a second, most famous. But yeah, okay. Boiler
Salt,
accident.
what is that one?
The
Sultana?
Sultana? You don't know the story about the Sultana? Yeah,
Oh,
look that one up. We
oh,
won't
is that
waste too much time.
the boat?
The riverboat, yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
in
Yeah.
recent memory, in recent
Recent
memory.
memory, and not the one in Brockton, Massachusetts that pretty much launched boiler. Yeah, so Dana Plumley. All kidding aside, Dana Plumley, I would say, yeah, I never really thought about it as being a report that has been around for, geez, almost, 19, 18, 19 years now. As being something that's being utilized until my chairman of repairs and alterations, dear friend of mine, Kathy Moore, with Joe Morgan Company out of North Carolina. We were talking about, we were at dinner or something, and at some meetings. She says, "Do you know that when new people come to work for us, they come into my office, or we'll get new reps come in." She goes, "I sit down and I reach into my drawer and I pull out your accident report and give it to them." I was like, "Really?" I was like, that's kind of cool. That wasn't the intent of writing it, and a lot of it was just pure shock that when you say boiler accidents are usually a chain reaction of missteps. They really are. Very rarely are you going to, especially in this day and age of automatically fired boilers, with all the controls and safety devices in place. I mean, let's think about it. We really have almost, standard package boilers like a Cleaver Brooks fire tube, a steam boiler. You're going to have what, one, two, three redundant overpressure protection devices. You know, you really see what it is you mostly see it's not just one thing. It's a combination of multiple things that causes in that case, boiler explosion and death. The only thing that I could say was that the maintenance personnel wasn't killed, even though he spent months in the burn unit. 75, 80% of his body was burned. Nobody died. It's incredible for the damage that was caused, for the people that were working on each side of the aisleway that this boiler shot through like a runaway train on the track, when it was only the luck of gods overlooking that it wasn't boiler number one. Because if it had been boiler number one that was sitting next to it, They would have taken down that whole cinder block wall that had people working at their machines on the other side of that wall. That there wasn't no one was over in the autoclave room, because that's what this was, is a rubber automotive rubber tubing parts manufacturer, and so they had autoclaves on the other side of the cinder block wall that just completely fell, or that the rear door that blew through this sheet metal wall is all it was, actually bounced off a few cars and hit a pedestrian bridge. If not, it could have shot all the way across into its sister plant. And that the operator himself wasn't behind the boiler when it blew or in front of the boiler when it blew. He was to the side of the boiler when I mean, those are the type of things is when you look at this and you go through down through it, I was just amazed. I was like, "You're kidding me. You're kidding," checking it off. This. And I said, and I started to put the report together. I said, this is going to be something else. And was very disappointed when I sat down in the after action meeting and told the president of that plant. And I mean, I was young. Yeah. I mean, I was a relatively young guy, right? And he was kind of like, "Hey, when can we get everything back up and going?" That's all he cared about. And I pointed across to him and I said, "Sir, this is your fault." But my what? My fault. I said, "This is your fault. You're the the head guy here at the plant. You put people in position to do their jobs and you don't support them. None of these guys knew anything about boiler operations. You have faulty equipment. You had no audible, no visual alarms. You didn't even have e-stops installed at the pedestrian exits. Is that an inspector's fault? Sure it is. Absolutely it is. That was one of the reasons, things like that was one of the reasons why when I was chief inspector, we enacted installation permit requirements that all boilers that are installed in any lethal service pressure vessels are going to be inspected by a state inspector first. Does that mean they're the better inspector? No. It just means that the chief inspector knows that the person that is going out there to do that initial inspection better do their job, or they're going to answer directly to their boss. Right. And I just told them, I said, this is a hot mess. Guys using baling wire and bubble gum to keep things together, not knowing how things operate, bypassing pieces of equipment because they're getting nuisance alarms and just rigging it up so it just works. I'm a hero. I'm a hero. And they're fortunate they didn't kill a bunch of people. And all he cared about was, when can we get the plant up and going again? Man, you better get away from me. So, yeah, it's a pretty in-depth report. I will agree with that.
I will link the report in the podcast description. We don't have to go over all the details, but it's a boiler. There's very great pictures. It's probably the most famous because the pictures are not 100 pixels in black and white. The pictures are great, and it's very shocking if you know what you're actually looking at. Most boiler accidents are swept under the rug. No pictures come out, or they're from the 1800s, and there's only paintings of the boiler accidents. Going back
the
to
Sultana. That's
the riverboat. But I've always told people, and this, I kind of got into it with somebody online, but there's this narrative that boilers are dangerous. I'm like, well, no, boilers are very safe.
Mm-hmm.
You make it dangerous by your actions. And in this time of engineering in 2026, we have figured out metallurgy and pressure vessels. And if you have, at this time, do the National Board and ASME, we understand metal to the point where a weld or a tube sheet is probably not going to rip apart, and we look at it and be like, oh, shoot, we're using the wrong steel. We need to
Mhm.
redo something like we would have
Mhm.
150 years ago.
Mhm.
But
Or making it out of steel this thick when in reality it only needs to be that thick.
yeah, so
I mean, that's where
essentially,
engineering advancements.
we figured out the engineering side of it. But what makes it dangerous is, as you said, all those tiny little incidents, and it's all those tiny little decisions. And it's very, a lot of people think that there's just one major decision that leads to an accident. But if you look at it beforehand, nobody ever says, hey, if I shut off this valve, if I do something, that's going to make this boiler in this building evaporate.
Mhm.
There's that when you are making decisions, when you're driving your car or something, you never say, hey, this is going to cause catastrophic events. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm going to do that. As long as you're working in under a positive
Mhm.
pretense, but not checking your water treatment and not checking your water softener for a year and not blowing down your boiler. That is a tiny little decision that multiplied over 365 days can make your boiler have water level issues. And then your plant manager says, hey, the boiler keeps alarming. Get back there and get it running. We need our shift production numbers. We need to reach our goal.
Mhm.
So then you go back there and you blow it down or do whatever. Oh, boiler's running. Everybody, you hear the fans start, whoo, and you're like, hopefully it lights. And for people that are uneducated, basically they just, oh, is there a fire in it? All right, there's a
That's all that
fire,
matters.
and
The fire.
they're looking for the lights that they normally see. And oh, okay. And then they look at the pressure. Okay, all right, we're making steam pressure. Okay, everything's good to go. And a lot of times, uneducated maintenance people will babysit boilers and do stuff that kind of like Dana Corp do things that are not safe, but they don't really know that it's not safe. They don't have enough education, and they don't have
Yeah.
enough people around them, but all they're worried about is get production going. If you ever worked in a production environment, it's go, go, go. And I have a,
Yeah.
I have a story. I don't know if I want to tell it about production, but, um, yeah, if you can't say no and have the enough awareness and calibration to know when, especially if you're a service company, an outside contractor, and you walk in and if somebody in a suit is back in the boiler room, something's wrong, and they say, hey, do that, and you know it's wrong, you don't work for them. You're an outside contractor. One, even if you did work for them, but you just say, no, I'm the authority. Basically, I'm not doing that. Get somebody else to do that if you want. But
Right.
there's other avenues, though. You can
Mhm.
call your chief
Yeah.
boiler of the state and say, hey, I think most states have a report or a reporting
Mhm.
process that says that you can report unsafe, and you can say, hey, they're doing
It's all
this.
confidential too, yeah. I mean, you
And
can.
the state can send out somebody that day or the next day, and they can walk in, and the state has the authority to say, nope, you're done here. And
That's right. That's right. They put a
using,
nice little red tag on it. I mean, I'd speak solely from the state of Tennessee because that's the only jurisdiction I ever worked for. They had the authority, but something else besides that. And if your listeners know this as well, especially those in the service industry, you have a responsibility. Some people say, "Oh, it's not my responsibility." Yeah, it probably is. And if you look really closely in whatever statute or whatever rules and regulations govern your license, if you have, let's say, you're a national board certified repair company, okay, that has a license to repair boilers in the state of Tennessee. or you're an insurance inspector that has a state commission to inspect boilers in the state of Tennessee. If you see an adverse condition, okay, and not report it to the chief inspector, that's going to fall back on you. Okay. Don't let that fall back on you. You know, you have the right, and you said this, and it's a lot easier said than done. I get that, Eric, is that, you know, you got somebody here and you got companies, and maybe it's a mom and pop shop that, you know, if they lose a contract with big corp ABC, um, they're out of business. And so they want to satisfy that client, you know, and they're going to do what they have to do. Well, I get that, but there's also a part of, man, if I do that, what happens if it hurts somebody? If I do that and the operator here is working and I'm at home, you know, in the middle of the night because I'm off, you know, off work, and this operator, something happens because I did something I shouldn't. How can you live with yourself with that? I can't, and I won't. And you know, with Boiler Supply Company, we fired customers. With ECS Consulting and Voice Code Training Group, we fired clients. Absolutely. You know, if you bring me in as on a consultant basis, okay, to whatever it is having to do with energy conversion or even safety or whatever, and I'm telling you stuff, and you're just like, yeah, we're not going to do it. Yeah, we're not going to do it. So why? I mean, that's fine. We're, you know, hey, I don't want you to train our people. This, I don't want you to give them a test. I just want, well, you know what? Go find somebody else. You know, it's, we're doing it the right way. It's not going to be so you can satisfy. So I'll get a client now that we haven't worked with in about 5 years, and they don't, they just want to get the check mark that it's been done, that they're satisfying somebody that's been done. They don't really care, or at least they're given that perception. They don't really care. They just want the check mark. And it's like, you may need to find somebody else. And that's just, you know, that's the way that I operate. That's not saying that that's the right way. That's just the way I operate my companies. And, you know, I just want to do it right. I don't want to have my conscience just eating away at me, um, for money, for production. I'm just not going to do it.
It is the right way. I've experienced that, and I try to keep up with safety culture. A lot of companies just want to pay a professional safety company. Hey, produce a safety manual for us. The manuals
Mhm.
come in, they're 5 inches thick. Look at our safety program. Look at these safety
This is your
manuals. This is amazing. We have 5 inch thick binders. They go on the wall. The SDSs go on the wall that are 10 inches thick. They give the employees a spill number. Hey, if you spill a chemical, call this number, and be like, oh, look how safe we are. And then it ends there. And
same.
nobody's ever, the biggest thing with training, and this, I don't know what the answer is, but there's a lot of information presentation out there that masquerades as training. And if I walk into a room and you have 10 people in the room and they're casual maintenance people, and the company says, hey, you're going to train our maintenance people. I've had this. It's like, okay, well, one, I'm going to inform them of very basic boiler activities. In 1 to 2 days or even a week, they are not going to become boiler operators.
Mm-mm.
And two, there has to be some kind of like give and take here. You can't sit in a room, and if you could, we everybody would know everything, but you can't sit in a room, watch a video, or listen to somebody talk, listen to me talk, and then learn. And
Mm,
every single person is different. And you may have a
mhm.
maintenance person in there that has 3 years experience, and you may have somebody in there with 30 years experience. And there's no easy way to train people. And if there was, let me know. I haven't figured it out and the world hasn't figured it out. But as we have started rolling up companies and training has become a commodity, we are treating humans as commodities and
mm,
hey, jump on this online class, click through
mm,
these information slides, you get this certificate, you are now trained. And there is
yeah,
no,
you're an expert, right? No.
yeah, there's no, people will hang up their certificates, they'll post them on LinkedIn. Hey, I did this, I did that, but there's no actual checking of competency and
Mm,
can you make the right decisions? Hey, if you blow down a
mm,
boiler and you open the bottom blowdown valve and no water comes out, yet the boiler's running, what do you do? Oh, I don't know. I've never had that happen before. And there's no systems around it. And as a company, your employees are not going to remember everything. And you don't want key man syndrome. You don't want Tom on first shift as the only guy that knows anything. And you have two other shifts that know nothing. And,
truck theory, Eric.
and Tom's 67 years old and working part time. And you don't want key man syndrome. And you want, if it can be written down, and I always, instead of having that 5-inch binder on the wall, take the sheet and say, hey, this is how you blow down a boiler. And you put it where, and you take pictures and do all this stuff. And you
Mm,
put it where people are going to see it when they're blowing down a boiler. So then it doesn't matter that it's on the computer system or on a binder in the plant manager's office. If you put the information at the actual point of use, they will have been trained on it in your training class, but also they will be starting to get reminded of the proper procedures because
mm,
listening, if you tell somebody something and then have it repeat it back, it is the most unreliable point of information presentation because if you tell a story and then ask people to tell it back, they will tell you 10 different stories.
mm,
Same thing happens with training. And a lot of people think, well, I just told these people this information, so now they all know it and they all understood me the same way. But if you actually went out one by one and said, hey, now do this, hey, do that,
mm,
a lot of companies would be shocked to find out what employees are actually doing or what, hey, they just walked out of a 3-day training class. They know that. They were rocking. Everything's good. Great. Give it 2 days. Now ask them.
mm,
See what they understood. And there is a huge divide and humans are imperfect. And I'm actually like, I constantly think about this all the time, but it's this, I think we've made training as a corporate in America too perfect for humans. Everything is streamlined. Everything is perfect slide presentations, AI narration, perfect graphics, all this stuff. And humans are imperfect. And if you only train on perfect brand new equipment and perfect situations where everything goes perfectly, you're not going to be prepared for the real world. And most training is for perfect situations and information presentation. And something I've realized is actually the best training is when everything is imperfect and you don't get up in front of the training class and know every single word that you're going to say and have it dialed down to the exact minute and everything's scripted and like a play and hey, I'm going to tell this joke here and this story here because you're telling it to humans. You're not there to entertain them. They're there to learn, and everybody learns differently. And it's like molding clay. You have to do it differently every single class, and even with every single human. And that isn't scalable. And it takes a teacher or a trainer to understand that. And there's very, very few people out there that can do it well at scale. And that's why I think we're kind of in the situation we are in America of every corporation just says, what what check can we write? What is the number on the check that will make my people trained? It's like, well, it's not that easy.
Eric, here's the thing with that, and I think you bring up a lot of good points. Everybody does learn differently. For BTG, we give different opportunities for providing training. If it's a younger generation, we have a hospital system, and one of their hospitals, I was just so amazed when I went there. They have a very young maintenance crew. I mean, when I say very young, and it's very diverse. It's females and males, and I look at it and I just smile, and I love it because I was talking to a few of them, and they were like, you know what? I could go to this school, and I was going to go to college, and I went to college, and I realized, if I go to college, I'm still working at this, retail store, or something like that, and I wanted to do something that I could build on in a trade, and it just made me smile because I thought it was great. Now, those people are going to training those individuals is going to be different than me training somebody that's in their 60s, okay, or somebody that's not as computer savvy as somebody that is. The one thing that I do say is engagement is everything. Okay. I've ran into situations where a corporation put or a company puts people into a room, and it doesn't matter if I'm as engaging as I can be, and people said, man, you see all the surveys coming back, and it's very, fills my bucket, and it's great, people, bragging about how great the classes are, and how great and knowledgeable I am, and everything else. Well, I don't there's a lot of knowledgeable people out there. There's a lot of good information that could be put out there. But it's really the presentation. You mentioned it about making it fun. It's not about making it fun. It's about making it one on one in a room full of 20 students. And one thing that you get is if you go to a BTG class, is you're going to get that one on one, and you better be ready. Okay. Because I'm going to call on you. Eric, you're sitting in the back of my class. You come in like a back row Baptist, and you're sitting back there because you think Marty ain't going to call on you. Well, guess what? One of the tricks I do, and I think I may have mentioned this to you before, is it's not really a trick. It's something that helps me because it's engaged. What do they say? One of the sweetest sounds to a person is hearing their own name, and you go into a room and you have 12, 16 people in there, and I go around the room and we do introductions and telling me your name, and I'm asking you to give me one of your hobbies. Tell me how long you've been here, what do you do here, and then what do you like to do when you're not here? Well, that whole time I'm putting in my head that I'm going to remember Eric. It's not that I'm ignoring what you're telling me, because you can tell me, hey, I like riding motorcycles. I've got a Harley. What do you got? Oh, I got a Honda, or I got a Yamaha. Up, and what, back and forth banter, and and you're making it fun, you know. But the whole time is I'm learning everybody's name. Why am I learning your name? Not to show you my little, parlor trick of once everybody's introduced, I go around to all 16, 12, 16, 18 people, and I tell you what your names are. It's because while I'm teaching, while I'm talking, yeah, I may have a presentation behind me that may have some bullet points, but I'm not reading from it unless it's something specific to the code or whatever that I need to articulate. It's because I'm going to call on you, Eric, and I'm going to tell people, and I'm going to forewarn them that you learn something new every day, such as I do. And it's okay not to know, because we all learn from our failures. You've heard me say that before. I know we don't learn from our successes, we learn from our failures. And if I ask you a question, Eric, and I ask you by your name, number one, you're going to be paying attention. Okay. You're not going to be on your phone because if I see you on your phone, I'm definitely calling on you. You start to nod off, I'm definitely calling on you. And we're going to engage. I'm not there to embarrass you. And somebody says, I don't know. Hey, no problem. Anybody else know? Well, good. Now we're all going to learn. And so there's part of that, and then there's part of repetition. And I would always give you advice because you're a trainer as well, and I'd give anybody advice. Don't mention something in the first hour of the first day and not mention it again for the next 2 days because nobody's going to retain it. We got so much information, and this is what it used to kill me is that we would do training programs and somebody'd say, oh, well, we just got 1 day to do a class. And what do you want them to learn? Oh, I want this and this and this and this. Realistically, their brains are going to be mush by the time. It's not going to be a 7-hour class. It's probably going to be a 10-hour class. And remember, we're going to break at every hour, approximately every hour, because the longer they sit, now they're sitting on their brains and they're not going to learn. And so we say, I'm going to teach you. And I tell all students in every class that I teach, I say, and they'll get it, usually it'll be around the second time I mention something. I said, oh, by the way, you're going to notice something in this class. We're going to be here 2 days and you're going to hear me introduce something to you. And then I'm going to reintroduce it to you. And then I'm going to hammer it home sometime later on, maybe 3-4 times. Because by the time we get to the end of this class, you're going to take, most cases, a 100-question final exam, closed book. All right. And the majority of people, our pass fail rate is pretty stinking. That to the point where a student that fails a final exam, okay, is invited to come back to our class the next time we have it free of charge. Because that's how we feel about it. And you'll hear some of these guys that have been in this, man, those some trick questions, and oh, I didn't get a 100 on your exam, I only got an 87. It happens. And so it's not a give me. It's pretty tough, but it's because of the approach that we take, and it's hands-on stuff too. Going out, doing tests on boilers, understanding. Maybe somebody taught you on the job, oh, this is the way you do a bottom blow off, or some people call it blowdown. And this is how you do it. Well, let me tell you why that's not how you do that. Really? Well, that's how I've always been taught. Even in the same company, it's crazy. Shift one does it one way, shift two does it another way. And you're sitting there looking at, really? That's interesting. And so it's like for boiler operations, because that's really where we're keying up here. If somebody were to ask me, like you were to say, what's the one thing that you would tell somebody to learn about boiler operations? If it's just one thing to learn, I tell people it would be sequence of operation. Why? Why sequence of operation? And I could ask you that, but it's your podcast, so I'm not going to put you on the spot. Why is it sequence of operation? Because all these boilers that we are really talking about, let's talk, we're not going to talk electric boilers or whatever. Let's talk about combustion fuels. They all have very similar, if not exact, sequences of operation. And so if I'm an operator and I need to troubleshoot, if I don't understand sequences of operation, and when I say sequence of operation, Eric, your audience needs to know, what are we talking about? We're talking about pre-purge to ignition to run cycle to post-purge or shutdown cycle. That's your sequence of operation, right? If I don't understand how a sequence of operation works, how am I going to troubleshoot it? How am I going to know when something's not working properly? When did I lose flame? Did I lose flame while I was running? Did I lose flame while I was trying to light the pilot? Did I lose flame when I was trying to light the main? And it's and if I didn't even get to lighting a pilot, why? Well, obviously, it's got something to do with the pre-purge. And I tell people all the time, I said, okay, so let's really talk about that. So if my pilot lit, right, I'm not thinking about anything that happened before that. I'm not thinking about pre-purge. I'm not thinking about PTFI, pilot trial for ignition. Now is something after that that occurred, right? And so now I don't have to worry about anything that had to do with my pilot. I don't have to worry about my combustion air proving switch. I don't have to worry about my blower motor starter. I don't have to worry about that. Now let's look here. And so I tell people all the time, if I can understand the sequence of operation, I can find out what caused it to stop operating. And that is huge. That is huge when we're talking about a boiler operating. All right. Because what ends up happening is, and the service companies are probably, shh, you have to quit telling them this, But I'm going to tell you, the boiler supply companies of the world, they don't want break and fixes. You say, what? No, they're working projects, right? The last thing that they want to do is pull Jimmy over here that's over here installing a new boiler or over here doing a planned maintenance program and setting combustion on the boiler to have to go over to Eric's plant to hit a reset button because we had something, trip out and they didn't know what caused it. And so it's like, okay, this is what it is. And you know what I mean? They don't want that because what happens is that time that they're spent going doing that, their project's getting farther and farther behind. So if I can teach people, I teach people. I'm not going to turn you in. Don't come to if we're talking about the BBO class, the basic boiler operator class that we've been doing since 2015, very successful over all these years. I'm not teaching you to be a technician. And you know what the funny thing is? And it says this is not to teach to make you a technician. We still have a lot of service companies send their people to the BBO class, knowing that I'm not teaching you to be a technician. And the reason is because they're wanting to learn what really is a boiler and how does that sequence of operation work, you know? And I think that's what the success has been. And we put it into a package where people walk away and I'm not just a talking head up there with your monotone voice and, you're engaging with them back and forth and you're learning and you're not afraid to say, I don't know, but you know what? During the next break or tomorrow, I'm going to come back with the answer for you. And then we're both going to know.
Well said. I agree with everything you said. That's, sequence operations is paramount. And that's when I was doing service. If I didn't know something, normally operators and like machine operators can tell you enough to so I would also do like industrial burners. So you walk in, custom film line, 3 stories tall. The operator platform is 200 yards down the plant. Everything's done by radios and they've got 15 burner zones and all this stuff. And it's 2 a.m. And they're like, well, it's not running. And you're like, okay, what are the wiring diagrams? Yeah, what do the wiring diagrams look like? And there are binders of wiring diagrams. They're like, which one do you want? And it's like, oh, okay. But it's okay, like describe what should be happening and then tell me what's not happening. Oh, well, when we push this button, we hear all the fans start, and then we have a 5-minute pre-purge, and then we start seeing ignition lights, and but burner zone 7, the ignition light comes on, but then it faults out and then the whole system faults.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not
All right.
verifications
Well,
and
that
stuff.
I
Yeah.
just know that now I can pinpoint, hey, we're probably not getting ignition or we're not proving flame. If there is actual ignition, we're not seeing
Mhm,
flame and
mhm,
getting
mhm,
feedback on burner zone
mhm,
7. And
mhm.
I don't need to understand this entire engineered system. I just need to
That's right.
understand what is not happening. And with boilers, it's the same way. And luckily, most boilers are consistent in the operation. And when I was a service technician when I was pretty young, I would get people like, "Oh, do you know how to work on this stuff?" I'm like, "Well, I've never worked on your boiler,
Yeah,
but
but you know,
your
it's very
boiler
similar. Yeah.
is much like
Yeah.
the 500 other boilers I worked on." So,
Well, see, that's where I tell you that the class is like the BVO class is not designed. Now we can do it. We do advanced boiler operator stuff too, but the BVO class. When I say that, we're not here to make you a technician, but what we are going to do is we're going to teach you to the point that you're going to be able to communicate with your technician. So like you said, somebody that says, "Oh, well, I don't know, it's not working," or whatever like that, and then you have to force it out of them to run through it, and maybe they still don't answer you. What we're going to do is we're going to teach you how to troubleshoot to the point where you're going to be able to communicate with somebody. Maybe it's something you can fix on your own, um, or troubleshoot. Maybe I'm not seeing a flame. Well, if I'm not seeing a flame, but hey, I look in the back and I see a flame. So there was a flame, and then the flame went out. So, well, how about let's look at the flame scanner? Okay. Oh, there we go. So I can clean off the lens of a flame scanner because it wasn't able to verify a flame. But then to the point where it says, "Hey, you know what? We're not getting this at this point in the sequence. It's not getting past our pilot." We had that situation at a hospital where it just happened to be, and this is one of the things we were talking about, clients and visiting clients. And one of the things we do is we do a lot of consulting work in Tennessee, where a lot of these clients, it's not like we write these programs for them. They get submitted to the state, get approved, and they're off and going. We never see them again. We stop by and we will run them. If I'm in the area, I'll pull in and I'll say, "Hey, I'm going to come by and run a couple drills with them, be there for 30 minutes and walk out and say, hey, you guys are doing great, or you guys are sucking at this. Let's work on it." And that's no charge. That's just courtesy because they're a client and we've done it for a long time. But we had the situation where we went in and started running some tests on making sure that people understood, and the communications at the remote stations were being run through. And but what was happening with this boiler is most boilers, and you can attest to this, most boilers and operators of boilers want the boiler to come up and stay up. Okay, we turn it on, we don't cycle for 2 weeks or a month or whatever. That boiler comes up and it never turns off. Perfect. I don't have a problem whatsoever with that. Well, that's what this hospital was having. Is boiler comes up and stays up until it's cycled over to one of the other five boilers. And so, situation, we started running a drill on one, and boiler goes down. Okay, boiler goes down, or boiler was up, boiler goes down, boiler lights again, run another drill. So we run a second drill. So once the boiler came up and it came out of low fire and it's fine, we give it a chance. And then we run it again. Now it goes into failure. And I started looking, I was like, huh, has this happened before? And it goes, yeah, it actually did happen one time before. So it's like, okay, here's an a training opportunity. It's like, you went to class, yeah. What sequence in the sequence of operation? When did that happen? He's kind of him and on. He's kind of sitting there scratching his head, and then it's like, really think about it. What happened? And he goes, okay, so we were lighting pilot. Okay, so we just ran it and it just lit, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay, but then we ran another drill on, and created another fault on something else, and now it's not lighting. So what components are going to cause that? And so you see this look on the face of this student that had been through is because it was a custom class for them and had been through it, and it's like, oh wow, okay, so yeah, I remember this, you know. And as an educator, I mean, my heart just gets filled, my bucket gets filled, and I feel great about it. And what it ended up being was the solenoid pilot valve. What would happen is it would open, okay, it would allow the pilot to light, then it would close. Well, what it would do is it would close and it would stick, okay? Then over the course of time, it would release. Does that make sense? And so it would open, fine, but when it's shut, it would stick closed. Well, because what we did was ran a cycle or let it come up and then ran another fault, it didn't have time to release. So when it asked for that solenoid to open back up again, it was stuck. And so the moral of the story is now this guy, because he went to a class like that and understand his sequence of operation, now he's able to talk to the technician and say, "Hey, I, what we've got going on here, we've got, because it's the fire triangle, right? That's the second thing is understanding the fire triangle. So you understand sequence of operation, you understand a fire triangle. We're creating a fire triangle, right? So now we say, well, when I looked, did I see an arc? Yeah, I saw an arc. Okay, so I've got the energy. Blower motor still blowing? Yes, blower motor still blowing. We've got that. What are we missing? We're missing the fuel. So now, where's that coming from? It's come from the cylinder. So now I got a bad cylinder. Hey, technician, we're not authorized to replace this. I need somebody to come out here. I'm pretty sure what we've got going on is we've got some bad solenoid valves. Can you make sure you have some on the truck when you come out? No problem. Boom, bada bing, bada boom. They're out there. A few minutes later, they're swapping this out. Yep, you're right. It's stuck. Boom, they're up and running. And it's all because that operator was trained to understand sequence of operation. Now I put him through the gauntlet of it, of saying, I want you to think now. He'll never forget that. He'll never forget that. He won't know everything every time, but he'll know all I got to do is think through the sequence of operation and I can pretty much pinpoint everything that happened. And now I can communicate it.
Yeah, that's great. I would say if you're a boiler company or have operators, never assume that they know something, because even as a trainer, I can show somebody something, they can watch me, I can have taught about it all day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, all right, you do it. And they will do it wrong, or they'll like miss a step, or they'll like do a step out of whatever. And you just need retraining. It's not like telling somebody something is one of the most inconsistent things to do. But then think about, hey, we have an entire organization and we've never had formal training, and first shift trains third shift randomly for a half hour in the overlap and this stuff and that stuff. And then all of a sudden you go to first shift and say, hey, how are you blowing down the boiler? And they'll show you. You go to second shift, hey, how are you blowing down the boiler? And they'll show you something wildly different and be like, oh, first shift trained us. And then you go to third shift and you're like, hey, how are you blowing down the boiler? And they will be wildly different, or even not know how to do it and just be checking off the box. And they'll be like, oh, first shift trained you. Well, first shift is doing let's say correctly. But even though first shift trains second and third shift are doing it wrong because there's nobody there to correct them and to put procedures around it beyond this, what is it called? Tribal knowledge. Most and a lot of inexperienced people just think everything is tribal knowledge and it's not written down, and it's just this like thing in the air that they have to learn. And once you like can start putting up some walls and some directions and paved roads of like, hey, if you start this boiler, this big motor, which is a fan, this is going to start every single time before there's a fire. And this is called the
Mhm.
sequence of operations. And once they start
Mhm.
understanding that, as you said, now there's like some structure around components. And then they start understanding how everything works together instead of just saying, oh, I understand this bullet point, I understand that bullet point, and I understand that bullet point. Well, that's great. But if you don't understand how they all mesh together,
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to understand and actually troubleshoot a problem or know what's going on. If you just say, my pilot is a small flame, my main
Mhm.
flame is a big flame, the fan makes air, but I don't
Mhm.
know how those all work together. And that's when I did my Foundations of Steam Systems class. Basically, the class can be summarized into knowing what your water is doing. And it's at any point in the steam cycle, you have to know what your water is doing, because if you don't understand what your water is doing in your steam system, you're not going to understand the steam system. And
Mhm.
one of the biggest things that can trip up operators is a problem in the plant will start causing boiler problems. So then they think they have boiler problems, but it can be, oh, hey, we just
Mhm.
added this giant machine, steam demand is up, all this stuff. But it's,
Yeah.
all right, what is my water doing? And by water, it's the phases of water, water to steam. Hopefully you never see ice in your steam system, but
I hope not. I
yeah.
hope not. I've heard it in some blowdown lines, but no. So there's one last thing that I'd like to add on to understanding sequence of operation is understanding that no matter how long you've you've been in something, things change. Codes changes, technology changes. Um, and so if we understand, we say, okay, sequence of operations great, along with understanding, your fire triangle for your boiler would be to understand where to find the answer. Okay. That is so important because I had this happen early on where it was an older inspector and I was the young pup and I was deep into the code books. I mean, my wife used to make fun. She would, she could go to the beach and take a Nicholas Sparks book, and I would take something, read about boiler code, and she'd call me a code geek. Was that you don't memorize the code. Don't memorize the code. Familiarize yourself with the code. Is that what you want to do? Is you want to put yourself in the position, and I don't have a problem with this because I don't want to just give erroneous information. It'd be like, maybe I haven't worked inside ASME Section 8 Division 1 code requirements in a while. Okay. And somebody asked me a question, I say, well, Eric, it's this, and I believe you've even done that. Where you've reached out to me about something that you were unfamiliar with, and asked the question. And I said, yeah. So let me take a look, or this is what I think it is. Let me take a look. The worst thing is, and somebody taught me this early on, and I then in turn have taught others, is when you find somebody that um, says they know everything about boilers, run the other direction. Okay. Because that person right there is either, you know, is shut themselves off to learning anything or to say, well, I've been in this industry for 38 years. You can't tell me anything. Or, hey, yeah, the code reads this. When's the last time you looked at that code? You know? Or, oh yeah, you got to hydro this boiler to 1.5 after repairs. Really? When's the last time you read the code? And that's the one thing I would say is find out where to find the answer. And that's probably that's a skill. I guess it would be a skill that I don't have a problem with delaying somebody to verify the answer because it just crawls all over me. And I guess it could be an ego thing that that I just don't want to tell Eric the wrong answer. I don't want Eric to come back and say, Marty's got this reputation in the industry for knowing this and this, but man, he told me this. He was so wrong. I don't mind being wrong, but if I can take a second or a minute or two to pull out the code book and verify my answer, then I'm a lot smarter than the guy that sits there and says, I can just pull it off the top of my head. Because one time there's going to be a change in that code and you're going to sit there with egg on your face. And so that's what I would tell you. And, kind of I know we're getting to the point where we're wrapping up is that, is don't feel like you need to memorize everything. Just know where to find the answer is huge.
Understand the framework and then know where to find the details.
Where to find it. That's right.
I was only successful as I was as a service technician because I would open up the manual, and you do things enough. And if you only work on boilers, you start
Yeah.
understanding like the details, but there's no reason to memorize a pilot setup for a burner when you can just open up the manual. But
and they could have a bunch of different ones. It matters
if you
what it
if
is.
you have all your codes and manuals all teed up and you're like, hey, I know it's in this, it's in section 1, but I don't know it exactly. It's something around this. Let's look it up. And that's a big thing also with training of, I try to get over to people, last point here, I try to get over to people that, hey, what I'm telling you is not like this thing I made up and only I know, and it's this tribal knowledge is taught down. Like, let me show you where I'm telling you this from, and let me show you this, so that you're not like, oh, I learned this and it was in Eric's class and only he knows this. It's like, no, I'm taking this from this code, which is ASME, which is this organization, and then this. And you go back to the primary sources and, hey, here's the manual of this. And this is where all this information is derived from. I didn't just like make this up, and it's not just this tribal storytelling where you can never reference what I'm telling you. And it's just, you have to believe me, because that leads to people being, oh, I don't remember. I need to either reference Eric's training materials or I need to call him and he's the only one that knows. No, I'm not the only one that knows. I'm just, as a trainer, as instructors, it's not, I'm telling you information. I am making you aware of where to find it and then how to understand it and interpret it. And that's so big in training. So if somebody is interested in a boiler class from you, how do they find you?
Yeah. So, you can always go and just go to boiscotraininggroup.com.
Can you spell that?
And Boisco, BOISCO, traininggroup.com is really the best place to go to find that. You can communicate through that. Definitely, we'll do some standardized classes, some water treatment and testing, basic boiler operator. I think a big part of what we do now is more of our custom classes, teaching people on their equipment. But the BBO class or the water treatment and testing class, those are great classes if you just have a one-off person that wants to come learn about boilers. That's really good, really good. But yeah, I mean, we do, like I said, we do a lot more than that on the consulting side. I mean, I would love for us to um, maybe do this again sometime and really talk some of the concerns with installations, of what you see out there when people are installing boilers and what they're not thinking about. That's kind of a thing is when they're putting boilers in, or you've got mindsets, and we work a lot with our clients on stuff like that, of understanding what the code requires or even what the code recommends, and then putting that into practice. But yeah, for any of the training, definitely go to boiscotraininggroup.com. Reach out to you can reach out to me anytime. I give all of our students, when they get their their books for their class. They all have it's got my card in there, and they know that they can call me anytime because they're questions that they have. Either it's going to cause me to learn more, or it's going to maybe even turn on something that's been turned off for a few years that I hadn't thought about. But yeah, we'd love to help anybody out that needs help with it, and we really enjoy what we do, just like you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how to put this together yet, and you may retire before I figure out how to do it, but I'm a very, very light WWE wrestling fan. I've always thought about how fun it would be, and maybe this would be more for people already in the boiler industry who want training, but more of a, instead of like, hey, this organization putting on this training event or something, more of a like a tag team training event
Yeah,
where it's like, hey, this instructor, we're talking about this, and then tag
yeah,
out, and then we're talking about this, and it's more of like a lighthearted kind of thing, but just bringing
absolutely.
in multiple people of different backgrounds and personalities and really get like a good mix in like 2 to 3 days of just, we're not here to like, hey, this company is the best, yada, yada, yada. It's, hey, we are all proponents of the boiler industry and we all love what we do. And it's just like a
Indeed.
just tag team match of just going through all this. I think it would be so much fun. I don't know how to do it yet, but I'll figure it out. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just any type of something like that, and opening it up to individuals. Maybe there's some type of function going on or something. I've sat in on those things before, and one of the funnest was when the national board had me come out, give them a presentation out in Las Vegas, and I didn't get to choose the subject though. They chose it, and I was like, I would never have chose that subject. But we made it fun, and everybody, they loved it, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll
And
definitely do it.
we could definitely have you back. The good thing about being the
Sure.
owner, producer, and host on the podcast is there are no rules. So
That's
we
right. You
can,
call whoever you want to, man.
yeah. So
Yeah.
we can already, I think I'm already going to have, I had a guest previously and he's already dying to come back and keep talking. I'm like, dude, you can be on the podcast 10 times. I don't care.
That's right. Yeah.
As long as people are, downloading, and I mean, I get some messages here and there and I see the download numbers, and yeah, we're getting there. But I really appreciate you coming on. If
No
you enjoyed
problem,
this
brother.
podcast, people, please rate it 5 stars. Go check out Boys Code Training Group, and you can find believe, are you Marty on LinkedIn? Is that how you say it? Or,
Yeah, I believe it's under Marty. I don't think it's under Martin. I hope not. I was Martin when I was chief inspector, and I told people that I stopped going business wise with Martin because you like Marty a lot better than Martin. so so that was kind of the running joke there. So but yeah, you can go out there. I don't I'm not as social savvy as you. Yeah, it is under Marty Toth. As you are, my young friend. Um, I have all these, maybe get somebody and have somebody do it for me is probably more realistic. But absolutely, I'm not technology illiterate by no means. Just kind of what am I spending the hours on? Does that make sense?
yeah,
And that's kind of
yeah.
where
But
I'm at.
it's if people, sometimes you post some stuff and some comments and
Yeah,
other
yeah,
stuff.
I'll comment a lot on your stuff because I think what you're doing is great stuff, and
But
and
I,
I really want to support that, and want to people that are putting good educational stuff out there, and you do a terrific job with that, Eric. I've commended you on that before, and
so,
and
some,
yes,
sometimes knowing where to find the right information is knowing the person to message or to call. And
that's right.
the more people expand their network of, hey, I know these people and this side and that side. And it's like, well,
Mhm,
why would I need to know somebody in California? Well, I
mhm.
don't know. You might have a question about, this and you don't do any work. So, but it's expand your network. Nobody has ever said, man, I just know so many people. I have somebody to call for every single problem and I can get an answer. It's just a terrible problem. No, nobody ever says that. If
No,
anything, people don't know who to call to get an answer and
that's right.
then they struggle. But yep, I appreciate you coming on.